always corruption. That's the human nature. And with the corruption, they even begin to sell the tickets to heaven, and it's called indulgence. And those things continue to happen. And then there's right before this, we have covered the history of crusade, Christians going against Islam and trying to conquer the land of Jerusalem, because many Christians believed that Jerusalem is the heart of Christian religion, and they tried to recover that from Islam. So crusade gone on for centuries, and that's why we still, the Christians and Islams, have admonitions. I mean, they're fighting against each other. That's a sad history, and I think Christians had made a large, big historical mistake on that. Anyhow, there was a crusade and the selling of the ticket to heaven. All these things happened. So there was Christians who were against these things that are happening. So Reformation is a changing of the whole system and the whole nature of Christianity. And Martin Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, these are some of the famous names related to the Reformation in Europe. So it started in Germany and went to France, and then other European countries followed it, and England followed it. So there's a Reformation. But the issue started with the Bible. Bible at the time of Middle Age, it was only written in either in Greek or in Latin. So those are two probably basic Bible available. And most people were not able to read or write Latin. They don't understand. So Bible was only being read to some special people who were educated. And there were people who were trying to translate the Latin into their own language, into German, into French, and into English. And there were some attempts, and the papal church, the Pope, and the Catholic Church even killed those who were trying to translate the Bible into English. And that kind of triggered all those outbursts of anger against the Catholic Church. So Latin Bible actually triggered the history of incident of Reformation. Okay. Monasteries. Monasteries were a very important part of Christian history, and we still have some of these monasteries existing today. And Franciscans, Jesuits, those are two probably known monasteries that were still in function. And monasteries were a place of study. They study theology. They study, what the Bible. So that was their main study, and they meditate, and their functions were limited to religious functions other than the labor. They did plant their own food, and they worked to raise food for themselves. So monasteries. There are many monasteries in Europe still existing. The monastery buildings became famous tourist attractions today. Now we'll continue with the Enlightenment and Renaissance. Enlightenment and Renaissance came as a result of Reformation. the papal church, the Catholic Church was the major power in Europe. Even though they had each government, each country had their own government, still the Catholic Church was the main authority in Europe. So Pope, whoever becomes the Pope, he is the like a president or the emperor of the whole Europe when one becomes a Pope. So Pope was the most powerful figure. And this resistance against the Pope, Catholic Church, not only became issue within the church, but outside the church. The secular people were begin to doubt and angry against Catholic Church. So that's the beginning of Enlightenment. And intellectualism. People are being educated. More people are learning. More people are reading. So they realize some of the things that the Catholic Church is teaching is not right. And they had developed their own consciences and own thoughts and own philosophies. As they are growing in their own philosophy, the intellectualism, meaning the use of your intellect, it becomes more popular and it becomes a big force in the running of European history. With that, rationalism. Rationalism is a way of reasoning. Reasoning becomes one major force in studying the things in science. So science, rationalism, and intellectualism becomes a mainstream thing in Europe. So many scholars, the scientists and philosophers are going to begin to follow that trend, and then comes enlightenment. Enlightenment means you are being lighted. So you are awakening. So another word for enlightenment is awakening. People begin to awake from their religious ideology, and that becomes the beginning of a new era. And now, in 15th century, they so-called found America, the new land. They also found South America and North America, and that kind of shocks the whole European population, because they thought that Europe is the center of the universe, and Europe is the only thing that's existing. And now they learn about China and other countries, but the discovery or finding of North America and South America, the new world, so-called, they call it New World, it becomes shocking to the European population. So the things are changing really, really quickly. What they knew for many centuries now becomes something of a big question mark. So people kind of ask questions, and they begin to doubt the authorities, and they were kind of going against the government. And then there's a French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution in England, and this political uprising against government also is a part of enlightenment. And then there's a cultural revolution going on in Europe with that alignment idea, and finally it resulted as a Renaissance. So 17th, 18th century, including probably some include the 16th century. So it begins at the 16th century and goes on to 18th century, which is a flourishing of European culture. So they build beautiful buildings, and the quality of life becomes more rich and abundant, and general population was able to eat daily, and they are beginning to have their own houses, and no longer they are oppressed by the government or the nobles. So that kind of changes the whole scene of Europe, and the culture becomes more rich every day, and that result Renaissance. The reason I'm saying all this is because whether it's Enlightenment, Awakening, Renaissance, it all has to do with the Christian influence, because the whole Europe now becomes a Christian, and majority of the population, whether they are Catholic or Protestant, they belong. I mean, a country is a church, and church becomes a nation. Nation is a church. For example, German Lutheran is the main denomination in German, and the Lutheran is a national church, which means everyone who is born to German territory, they become a Lutheran. It was like in Roman Church. I mean, after the Constantinus emperor, he proclaims Christianity to be the national religion, and then everyone who born into Roman Empire, they are automatically Christians. And so those things happen into Europe. So whole Europe becomes more Christian. So this is the root of Enlightenment and Renaissance. And this Renaissance, even though they think historians say it's like ended in 18th century, but this influence of Christianity in the culture and the civilization, European civilization, and now to North America, it continues. And even though we are in still 24th century, this force, the ideal and philosophy, and the worldview, eventually, the worldview of Christian worldview influenced the Europeans still continue with the North America. And you may not agree, but for example, I can talk about North Korea, but South Korea and Japan, I'm not that sure, but Korea and even China is very much influenced by the Christian worldview and thoughts and ideologies. So before the China become a communist country, there were a presence of thousands of missionaries in China in early 1920s, 1930s. And then there is a cultural revolution in China, which resulted in kicking out of all the Western missionaries. And there was an absence of missionaries for like 70, 80 years so far. But those missionaries still have the churches and the Christians left in China. And those people, I mean, they continue to evangelize, share the gospel and the Christian faith. And statistically, we believe there is at least 200 million Christians in China, mainland China alone. We cannot find out the exact number, but at least 100 million to 200 million Christians are in China. So that means these Enlightenment, Renaissance, and the European Christian influence went to North America, and the missionaries from North America and England went to China, and that China is being continue to be influenced by this Christian philosophy and worldview, whether the Chinese government like it or not, it is what is happening there. So the history is not just a story, but it always has that meaning and implications. These implications are important for us today, because knowing those implications, we can kind of predict what is going to happen in the future. So that's Enlightenment and Renaissance. The New World. After the 18th century, actually the latter half of 18th century is the age of New World. And because these Baptists, or so-called Anabaptists, they are the first ones to decide to leave their own country for the freedom of religion. I told you that the whole Europe became like a Christian land. Their 90 plus population are Christians, whether they're nominal or true Christians. So they were called Christians. And they had a strong doctrine of their own. And these Anabaptists had a different doctrine. They had a different belief about the baptism and the salvation and who Jesus Christ is. And the state church, so-called the state church, is a church, national church, state church, like Lutherans or Anglicans, or the Netherlands, Denmark churches. These churches thought these Anabaptists are heretic. Heretic means they say they are Christians, but not really Christian. So those are like a heretics. And Catholic Church and even some Protestant denomination, the churches, thought that these Anabaptists are heretic. So now they have no place to live and no place to worship. So they decide to leave their own country and go to the New World. In the New World, which is North America, there's no solid authority. And Puritans as well, they're the ones who had a different doctrines about Christianity. And they also decide to leave Europe and come to America. So Mayflower is known as, in American history, Mayflower ship. Mayflower is a big thing. Some Puritans leave England and come to North America. So these Anabaptist Puritans, they decide to leave and come to U.S. Columbus, you know the story. Now, conquistadors. Those who are from Latin America knows that word, and it's not a good word. It's just like a word crusade to Islam people. It's conquistadors are mainly Spanish and Portuguese militants who invaded, actually that's the correct word I think, invaded South America and Central America and begin the ethnic cleansing, meaning they made a slave out of the local people, indigenous people, and even killed many of them. Not just in thousands, they killed like millions indigenous people. So these conquistadors are militant, but the funny thing is, those conquistadors did that in the name of Catholic Church. and they say they are converting the indigenous people to bring them and make them better. And they said we are going to make a God's people. Same thing with the crusade. But the Christianity never teaches to force anyone into its belief. If anyone does that, it's against the biblical teaching. You cannot force someone to believe in something. I mean, that's not belief. When you're forced to believe something, whether it's ideology, whether it's a religion, whether it's a philosophy, it doesn't matter. And you cannot force anyone to do something or even to believe, because belief is what's inside, and belief is totally yours. You can be probably manipulated and kind of make you think that you believe. That's manipulation. It's not true belief. True belief comes when you decide on your own. It involves your personal decision. It involves your whole person. It involves your spirit, soul, and your mental, everything. And you make that decision. And these conquistadors, they forced those indigenous people to believe in Christianity, Catholic Church. So it was wrong from the beginning. But that's the kind of sad history, mainly in Central and Latin America. And many indigenous people still, they do not like the white people. Because those are the white people who have made them slaves and made them into laborers and made them into forcefully into the membership of a Catholic Church. So we learn lesson. The major lesson we learn is at any cost, if you are a Christian, do not try to force anyone into the faith. It doesn't happen that way. Because God never does that. God comes and tells you, asks you. He does not force you to believe Him. Because belief is a genuine stuff. You cannot force anyone to believe. That sentence, the statement itself is incorrect. Now, North America, Native Americans. When the Puritans came in, now it's Georgetown in New England. It's a really small town. There they have all those historical things there. But Puritans never aimed to, rule over America. They were like refugees, and they were with really pure hearts. That's why they're called Puritans. And they were friends with indigenous North Americans, the so-called North American Indians. It's not, they are not actually Indians, but Columbus thought he found the east side of India, and he was wrong, right? So they were called Indians, but they are not Indians. Actually, they are North Americans, the original North Americans. And they were in peace until some other people came into North America, and they had idea, just the same idea as conquistadors. So they begin to conquer the North America. They were all Christians. I mean, God-believing Christians, and they begin to kill in the name of conversion, and that's a sad history. And even if I've learned American history in high school. I told you that I attended missionary kids school as a 100% American. And I learned 2 years of American history. And guess what? the story about killing the indigenous Americans is only a little part of it. So, I mean, the America is pretty much, they say is balanced country, well balanced, but I don't think in history-wise they are hiding many things. So there is sad history done by the American, so-called Christians, and they are the ones who kind of told the myth of, after Noah had his ark, the flood, and after that he had three sons, right? And there is this Christian myth saying the white and yellow and black. This is like a major three ethnic groups became, and if you know the story of Noah, Noah was drunk. He was so drunk he was naked, totally naked, and he was sleeping in his tent. And the one of son came in and saw that, and he didn't do nothing and just came out and kind of bragged about it to other two sons. And one of the sons took the garment and then walked backwards and laid that garment on him to cover Noah's naked body. So there's like a three. One who saw it and kind of bragged about it, cursed it, and there's one who did kind of cover that, and there's one who has done nothing. So one who cursed and bragged about his father's naked body, he became black. And one who had a garment and walked back and covered the body, he became the ancestor of white people. And who has done nothing became ancestor of yellow people. So that's kind of Christian myth. And largely, still a large population in America, the Christians, they still believe that thing. So as dumb, it's stupid, but many believe that. That's why some Caucasians and some white people cannot get out of their racist perspective because it connects with their religion belief. So these are the dark side of Christianity, and it's not happening because God is racist or God has a dark side, but it is us human beings who still have those dark sides. And it is because many those so-called Christians do not have the right knowledge of Bible. So it is important to learn from Bible and not from people. People can say this and that, and they cannot be correct all the time because people never perfect. So you listen to my lecture, but I'm not perfect. I can be mistaken. I can tell you the wrong information or wrong perspective. So do not believe everything that I say, and you make your own judgment. That's what a good student is. You don't just listen and accept everything that professor or teacher tells you. You don't do that. So make a discernment, make a judgment, and because the best guideline or standard that I know as a Christian is Bible. Other than that, as many myths and stories and faults and mistakes and lies. And so some Christians were very corrupted and twisted, so they did all these bad things in history. So we, if you're a Christian, need to be aware of these mistakes and try not to commit the same mistakes again. And it takes a lot of courage to admit that you are wrong. Because even though I did not do this, I mean, as a Christian, I feel responsible, and my responsibility is try not to do the same thing personally, and as a church, and even as a nation. So these are the good lessons on history about Christianity, and these things did happen. So many Native Americans, they were killed without, I mean, in a war, man kills other man. I mean, they have weapons and they have to use those weapons. That's one thing. But to kill the children and women who have no defense, that is never justified. And the killing of young and weak, that had happened in American history by Christians, so-called Christians. Now we come to 19th and 20th century, which is the best century so far of Christian religion. And the Christianity flourishes, it flowers, and it becomes probably the most in history in 19th and 20th century. So Christianity is a big thing. Now 24th century, I kind of doubt it. I mean, the Christianity is not the global religion, and I don't want Christianity to be the global religion, but I want the Christianity to have good influence in human history. And that 19th and 20th century are the centuries where the Christianity had the most positive and global influence ever in history. So that's, they had like a missionaries, and once the North America sent several hundred thousand, less than a million, but several hundred thousand missionaries globally. And annual count of missionaries reached like 100,000 plus. And globally speaking, there are millions of missionaries going out to other countries to share the gospel. Not only to share the gospel, those missionaries went to the underdeveloped countries to serve the poor and to help the development of the country, economic and social development. So many so-called third world countries were helped by these missionaries, and now still many third world countries are being helped. For example, in Central America, most of the foreign venues come through the missionaries. They actually live by missionary money. Some of the Central American countries. So these are like a good contributions by missionaries, and that's happened in 19th and 20th century. And the Great Revival in America, North America, also happened in at the beginning of 20th century. We have a 1907 revival, which is a very famous revival, and it happened in began in California and went throughout the whole North America, including Canada. So those revival, I can talk about it for whole class, but I'll just brief on this. So there's a great revival and a Christian revival, and then Edinburgh, 1910. That's the year where all the missionaries, a representative of all the missionaries from all the corners of the globe came to Edinburgh in England, and they come together to have a conference, to have an assembly, and they proclaimed the word evangelization by the end of 20th century. So that was their goal, their dream, and that's evangelization is still going on, but that's a very critical year and the event in Christian history. And the rise of liberals after 1910, and in 1920 and 1930s, so-called ecumenical movement becomes a big topic in Christian history. Many European countries and many denominations, they kind of come together and try to build a universal church. The Catholic is already there, universal. I mean, meaning the globally present, and there's one church, one only Catholic church under Pope. But Protestant churches, there are many denominations: Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, and Pentecostals. All these different denominations, and they have a different doctrines, and they've never been one church. So there was a movement to make that all the Protestant denominations together, unite them, and to make it a global power. Not just for the power's sake, for the evangelization, meaning to spread the gospel globally to every corner of the globe. Because that's basically the Christian's main vision. If you're a believer, I mean, trying to reach out to the every nation and every people, every ethnic group, every tribes in their own language. That's a dream, and that's the vision of all Christians. I mean, that should be the vision of all the believers. Because of that, force and initiative and the thrust and the power, they try to come together as a one church. But somehow there's radicalism, which came out of the political scene, comes into this ecumenical movement, and now they are called the liberals. There's something called a liberal theology, which says the Bible may include the Word of God, but the entire Bible is not the Word of God. That's a big difference for us believers. For me, the whole Bible, entire Bible, does record the Word of God or history of God. But these liberals, they believe some portion maybe is the Word of God, and rest of them is a man-made, or man has written their own ideas, not the Holy Spirit. So there is a difference, big difference in theology. So one believes the Bible, entire Bible, is inspired by God, the Holy Spirit, and there's a group of people and the scholars saying, no, that's not the case. There are many deductions and editings have done by human beings. Thus, we cannot believe the Bible, entire Bible, is the truth. And there might be some truth in it, but we cannot believe whole Bible is the truth. So it's like a saying, for the sake of some Islamic students we have. It's like a saying, someone saying the Quran is not really the Allah's word of Allah, and some portion maybe that is not entirely true. And when you say that in an Islamic country, then you are going to die. And so that happened with the Christian faith. Some denies the authority of Bible. So that becomes a big issue, and they are called liberals. And because of that, the rise of evangelicals is a natural thing. Evangelicals are the ones who believe the authority of Bible, the inherency of Bible. I'll make a definition of it. What's inherency? Also, infallibility of Bible. So, in simple words, they believe in the Bible is truth and the entire Bible is truth. Those are the evangelicals. And I claim myself to be an evangelical Christian, while there are some liberal Christians who does not believe in the same way. And then comes Lausanne 1974, which is another big kind of landmarking event in Christian history. The evangelical leaders come to Lausanne, Swiss in 1974. And they spend several days together praying and discussing and doing some researches. The reason they come together is because of the threat of those ecumenical movements. Not the liberal per se, but ecumenical movements. They were threatening the whole church. The World Church Organization, which is called the WCC, was present. And then many leaders in WCC, they were politically influenced by either socialism, communism, and some other radical ideology. So they were trying to bring that political ideology into a Christian church. So it becomes a big issue, because many believed at the time that still the evangelical believes that state and the religion is separated. They cannot be combined together. So in Lausanne 1974, they said that evangelism and the social responsibility, those are two major parts of Christian practice. And social responsibility is secondary to the evangelism. That's what they claim. So that's kind of event in Christian history. And in 1974, after Lausanne, we can see two divided Protestant force, one evangelical and one Christian. Start by asking which of the following is not a belief in the Old Testament era, especially those early beliefs. A Yahweh belief, Zionism, animism, messianic belief. Answer is C. Animism is not a part of early beliefs or Christian belief. Number 2, which of the following is not a part of Old Testament era, and especially on tribal age. Tribal ages are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and Joseph. These are the tribal fathers. Jesus' narrative, the patriarchs, Exodus, and Jacob's refugee to Egypt. And Jacob went to Egypt because of famine in the land of Palestine. The answer is A. Jesus' narrative is part of the New Testament. Number 3, which of the following is not a part of Old Testament era, especially on the age Israel as a nation? There were kings, of course, and there were two divided nations, and the invasion of Babylon and Assyria are the history. B, resurrection is a history of a New Testament, Christ, resurrection. Number 4, which of the following is not a part of Old Testament era, especially on the suffering of Israel? A, diaspora to Assyria. B, captivity by Babylon. C. Major prophets. D. Abraham. Abraham is a story of early tribal age. So answer is D. Abraham. Number 5. Which of the following is not a part of New Testament era item? Now after Jesus, John the Baptist, 400 silent years, Pentecost, apostles. Pentecost happens after the resurrection of Christ, so that is yes. B, answer is B, 400 silent years. It precedes the birth of Jesus. So after 400 years, no prophecy at all, then Jesus was born. So the answer is B, 400 silent years. Number 6, which of the following is not a part of New Testament era history? A. Canaan conquest. B. Jewish Christian diaspora. C. Jewish synagogues. D. Persecutions. The answer is A. Canaan conquest happened after Exodus. Moses, actually Joshua led this Canaan conquest. Number 7, which of the following is not a part of early church history topics? A. Coptic church. B. Ethiopian church. C. Early fathers. D. Renaissance. The Renaissance happens in 16th century, 17th century. So answer is D. Renaissance. Number 8. Which of the following is not a part of Middle Age Christian history episodes? A. Rise of Islam, and B. Crusade, yes, and C. Papal Catholic Church, there was, and the D. Revolutionaries is not a part of the Middle Age Christian episode. Number 9. Which of the following is not a part of Middle Age Christian history again? A. Latin Bible. B. Revival meetings. C. Monasteries. D. Rise of Orthodox churches. The answer is B. Revival meetings. That's in history, 19th and 20th century history. Number 10, which of the following is not a part of Enlightenment history in Europe? Okay, we just had a study on this. Intellectualism, humanism, an age of reason. The answer is D, Dark Age. Dark Age is another name for Middle Age in Europe. So please get the correct answer so you keep it and study later for the finals.
So, excuse me, 8, number 8.
Number 8?
Yeah.
Answer for number 8 is D, revolutionaries.
Question 3 is a B, right? B for boy, right?
Number 3?
Yeah, it's a B, right?
Yeah, B, like a boy. Good.
或者你看一下，如果这张纸来给我，final 就会考这些评题。
So let's continue. Before we continue, the first book report is due next week. Okay, and you can find the English version online. There is several online full text. You can some of them you can even download in PDF form. So just Google the title "Basic Christianity" by John Stott, and you'll find the full text free, and you don't have to pay for it. So, and then the second book, Know What You Believe, also is online, free PDF download possible. So you can download the free copy and read them, and just do not summarize. Again, do not summarize. I don't want you to summarize. Just please help me to have your reflections on any. You can just focus on any of those topics. There are like 12 chapters, and each covers different topics. So you can focus on one topic. If you don't have time to read the whole thing, just read the one portion of it and say things that you kind of what you think about it and how you react and your feelings. So do not repeat the contents in the book. Never do that. All right. So we covered 19th, 20th century and modern era of Christian history. That's where we are in now. And the decline of the Western Church. European churches, many of the church in England either turned into a mosque or they become theaters or the dance floors. Those old churches in the downtown in London, many of them now no longer a church. So the decline of Western church, Western Christianity is visible, it's evident. Even in America, the church is not growing anymore. The church, the numbers of Christians are beginning to decrease. And so it's sad to say, but the Korean churches, once it reached like 10 million Korean Christians out of 40 million. So at least a quarter of Korean population were known to be Christians. Not anymore. It's probably under 5 million today. So the Korean church in South Korea is getting smaller, and immigrant church the same. The Korean church in America, the number of believers are decreasing. So there is definitely a decline of Christianity and the rise of Islam. Islams are growing in numbers and in the territory they cover. So there is a certain change. But at the same time, rise of the third world church. For example, church in Brazil is growing rapidly. It's explosive. And some other countries in the churches in Africa, African churches are growing fast. So third world church are growing while the Western church is declining. And indigenous church is a big topic. Indigenous means Koreans have Korean churches, Cambodians have Cambodian churches, Chinese have their own Chinese churches. These are the indigenous churches. And no longer missionaries lead or exercise authority over those churches. So that becomes a big topic in 21st century. And also emerging church. This is a new trend in the church movement. So they're thinking, why do I have to come to the church building every Sunday and the worship the way we did? Can we do it differently? And there is like an emerging church, small church meeting in the houses. And this is one of the trend. Or there are even churches going out for like a picnic every Sunday. So this is kind of emerging churches. But they worship there in the park and in the wilderness. So that's different kind of church. Missional church is another topic. I won't go deep on this. Impact and significance. Now, the reason that we, looked back to all the history, the history of Christianity, is because of this. Throughout those 2,000 years after the birth of Jesus Christ and death and the resurrection, that resurrection happened in probably AD 33, somewhere there, between 32 and 33. We don't know exactly, but many believe Jesus was crucified, killed on the cross when he was 33. But that's not really, a fact. We cannot verify that. Anyway, So after resurrection, year 33, and we are in 2019. So just a little less than 2,000 years of history. Christianity has changed the global history. The history of Middle East, history of Europe, and history of North America, and even history of Asia. So there has been much impacts and influences. And some of them, I cannot list all of them, but we can just name some. Academic development. The way we do like this. I mean, modern education is a fruit of Christian education. The monastery, the universities and colleges in the first ever colleges. I mean, the higher studies happened in the land of Egypt, and that school was a Christian one. So the education, 2,000 years of modern education, the history itself is a Christian education history. So academic development, Renaissance, Enlightenment, it took a large impact on the modern science. So all the modern academic activities that we enjoy and do, the freedom of education and a broad popular education for everyone, that's the result of Christianity. Technology, of course. For example, printing. The printing was developed because they wanted to print Bible copies, more copies, faster and cheaper. That's why the printing has developed. And Gutenberg, he had that metal, the printing with the separate pieces of letters. So that's the kind of examples how the Christianity influenced the technology. And the science, of course, and democracy, that's probably the most valuable product or result of Christianity. Without Christianity, there probably never has been democracy in global history. And because democracy, basically every human being is important and valuable, whether they are which race, which sex, gender, doesn't matter. Even those who are disabled and challenged in different ways, they are also have that human dignity. So every person is respectable. They have right to live, and their life is as important as those life of rich ones or nobles or kings. So that idea is from Bible. Only the Bible teaches that kind of idea. No Buddhist the scripture does that, and other I mean, Confucius' ideal is a good idea, but it never teaches everyone is valuable as he or she is. So the core of democracy is a biblical idea or the view, and it's Christian. The living standard. Compared to like 2,000 years ago, how people lived, their economy. I mean, these days you can buy the smartphone, which is several $100 per piece, and most of people can buy those. And then most population, I mean, at least 2/3 of world population never go hungry to their bed. Still, 1/3 of world population goes hungry when they go to sleep. So there's still much work to do. But in the ancient, I mean, 2,000 years ago, only probably the 10% of the whole global population went full belly when they went to bed. They were able to eat 2 or 3 meals a day. Still in Africa, I mean, I was in Africa for 5 years, so I know how it is. They only eat one meal a day, and many of them, probably 70-80% of population in Africa, 40 years ago, they were able to buy only one meal per day. Now it's much better, but still, there's much work to do. But the contribution of Christianity, it increased the economy and made people rich. Because what the Bible teaches, you have to work. The copies that we have is always copy of the original, and no one ever seen the original copies. Whether it's Isaiah, they found the oldest Isaiah in the cave of Qumran, but that's not original either. There's 39 books in the New Testament. Actually, 27 books in the New Testament, but none of the copies that we have is original. So the original Bible copy is missing. We cannot find any of them. All the manuscripts that we have is handwritten copies of the original. So that's one thing that you cannot verify the authenticity of the Bible, because we do not have the original. If we did have original, we might be able to authenticate all the copies. But another issue, if we had the original copies, probably people may begin to worship that Bible as God. So probably that would be the reason why God did not allow us to have the original copies. Same thing with the cross. Catholic churches today, even they sell some piece of wood and say this is the original piece of wood from the cross that Jesus was hung. And it's very expensive. And they just bring that home, buy that and bring them home and put it on the best place in their house and worship it. So that could have happened with the original copy of Bible. Anyway, that's the same the thing, but we do not have those copies anymore. And we'll cover this far. Literature genres. If any of you guys majored in literature, whether it's Chinese literature, English literature, or Korean literature, any student of literature should have heard the word genre, meaning the kinds of writings and different style of writings. When you write something, there are several different genres and styles. And first genre that history, it's a record of history. So Bible has the record of history. For example, the Genesis, the story, is full of story. That's a history. First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles in the Old Testament, those are the history books. So it's a history of Israel. All the kings are listed there, and what they did, and who they were, and those things are written, and it's in the Bible. So history of Israel is included in the Bible. And law, first 5 books of Bible, so-called Pentateuch or Torah, those are the law of Israel people, Jewish people. So Jews, they did not have the civil law until the modern era. They had their Bible. That's their law. 960 some detailed rules were there. So they kept that, and so Bible includes the law. The formal legal documents are there in the Bible. So that's the second genre. Wisdom literature. Wisdom literature, most example is proverbs. These proverbs are wisdom. I mean, people write their wisdom in writings, and it becomes a wisdom literature. It talks about philosophy. It talks about wisdom. It talks about ideas. It talks about the right and wrong. These things are included or categorized as wisdom literature. And proverb, psalm. Psalm is poetry, but it also has a wisdom. And what else? Lamentation. Lamentation is one wisdom list. So when you look at the Bible, there is several books categorized as wisdom. Poetry. Psalm is the most famous poetry that we know of, and 150, almost 150 poetries are listed there. So Psalm is part of poetry. Prophecy. Prophecy has to do with the messianic prophecy. So in the Old Testament, there are two different kind of prophecies: major prophecy and minor prophecy. And they talk about the coming Messiah, what's going to happen to Israel in the coming days. And in New Testament, at the very end of the New Testament, there's something called the Revelation, which talks about what's going to happen at the end of whole human history. So those are the prophecies. Proverbs included in the wisdom literature, or some scholars separate that as a different kind of a type of literature. So what I'm saying is, Bible has many different kind of literatures included. It's not just one type. It's not a novel. It's not just a story. It's not just a teaching. It includes those things together. So very dynamic kind of literature is the Bible. It is worth, I mean, if you're studying literature, especially if you're studying English literature, a reading of Bible is a must. So we'll finish here today, and have a nice day, and we'll see you next week. And please don't forget the book report. If you decide not to do it, that's fine. It's going to be 10 points, only 10 points. And,
他说你没有 report 不写没关系，他就给你扣10
Thank you,
分。
teacher. Where is the sign?
你可以不写，就这个，我看你
I didn't sign it.
下周要交的那个。